The most terrifying team in the Eastern Conference right now may not be the number 1 seed Detroit Pistons. It may not even be the Cleveland Cavaliers, who just dragged that series back to 2-2 behind Donovan Mitchell. Historic 39-point second half. The team that should truly scare the East right now might be the New York Knicks. Because what they just did to Philadelphia was not a normal series win. It was not a close 4-0 sweep. It was not a survive in advance type of playoff escape. It was a demolition, a statement, a warning. The Knicks did not simply eliminate the 76ers. They ripped through them 4-0, ended the series with a 144-114 blowout in Game 4, and marched into the Eastern Conference Finals for the second straight season, while the Pistons and Cavaliers are still beating each other up in a 2-2 war. And that is why this matters. Because when one contender is still fighting for survival, and another contender has already finished its job, rested its stars, and begun preparing for the next round, the conversation changes. The question is no longer, are the Knicks good enough to reach the East Finals? They have already answered that. The real question now is, have the Knicks quietly become the team in the East that is most built for playoff basketball? And if you watched how they destroyed Philadelphia, that question suddenly does not sound exaggerated at all. Let's start with the obvious. A 4-0 sweep is already loud. But a 4-0 sweep where the final game turns into a 30-point annihilation is something else entirely. The Sixers scored the first basket of Game 4. After that, New York detonated a 20-4 run, built a 20-point lead before the end of the first quarter, and eventually led by as many as 44. The game was not competitive. It was over before halftime in spirit, and by the third quarter, the Knicks had produced one of the most efficient offensive performances the league has seen in 3 decades. That is the first reason this sweep feels different. The Knicks did not win because Philadelphia collapsed once. They did not survive on one lucky shooting night. They beat the 76ers in almost every version of playoff basketball. Game 1, they overwhelmed them. Game 2, they survived a tighter game and closed it late. Game 3, they controlled the game even without OG Anunoby and handled Joel Embiid's return. They removed all doubt and turned elimination night into an offensive explosion. That matters because truly dangerous playoff teams do not need every game to look the same. They can beat you ugly. They can beat you with shot making. They can beat you with defense. They can beat you with rebounding. They can beat you when the game gets slow. And they can also beat you when it suddenly becomes a track meet. That is exactly what the Knicks are becoming. And the biggest mistake right now would be to reduce all of this to one name. Jalen Brunson. Yes, Brunson is still the engine. Yes, he is still the guard who can shrink the floor, control pace, and manufacture offense when possessions become ugly. Yes, he gave Philadelphia 33 points and 9 assists in Game 3. And his shot creation remains the emotional center of this team. But this series proved something even more important. The Knicks are no longer dangerous only because Brunson is brilliant. They are dangerous because the entire team has started to play like it understands exactly what wins in the postseason. That is what makes them different. Look at Game 4. Miles McBride, starting in place of Anunoby, went 7 for -9 from 3 and scored a career playoff high 25 points. Josh Hart hit 4 threes. Karl Anthony Towns kept the offense stretched. Mikal Bridges had already been on a scorching run entering Game 4, and the Knicks, as a team, hit 25 three-pointers, tying the most ever made in an NBA playoff game while setting a franchise record. This is not the old Knicks stereotype anymore. This is not just a team that drags you into the mud and hopes Brunson creates enough miracles late. This is a team that can now punish you from every layer of the floor, and that creates a terrifying playoff formula: physicality without losing spacing, rebounding without sacrificing offense, half-court toughness without becoming predictable, star creation without overdependence. That is exactly the profile of a team built to win hard games. And if you want to understand why New York suddenly looks so threatening, you have to look beyond the 144 points. The score was flashy. The deeper truth was brutal. The Knicks are winning the possession battle in a way that slowly suffocates opponents. Against Philadelphia, they dominated the glass. In Game 3, they grabbed 13 offensive rebounds and outscored the Sixers 20-11 in second. Chance Points NBA.com noted that through that point, New York had been the best rebounding team in the playoffs by a healthy margin. That is not a side detail. That is a playoff weapon. Because in the postseason, missed shots are not simply missed shots. If your opponent grabs the rebound, you survive. If New York grabs the rebound, you have to defend again. And defending again against this Knicks team is exhausting. You stop Brunson's first action, the ball gets swung. You close out to Bridges, Towns lifts into space. You contest the three, Hart crashes. You finally force a miss. Robinson or another Knick steals an extra possession. That is how a team turns a good defense into a tired defense. And tired defenses eventually crack. That is what Philadelphia experienced. The Sixers were not only outshot, they were worn down. They were pulled apart by extra possessions, late, clock problem solving, and a Knicks team that never stopped applying pressure. In Game 3, New York shot 13 for -22 in the last 7 seconds of the shot clock, while Philadelphia went just 4 for -18 in those same late clock situations. That number says everything about playoff maturity. When possessions got ugly, New York still found answers. Philadelphia did not. That is the kind of difference that defines a hard-nosed postseason team. Anyone can score when the first option works. Dangerous teams score when the first option dies. And this is why the Knicks are starting to feel more like a monster than a surprise. They are not relying on one hot hand. They are not relying on one emotional run. They are stacking strengths. Brunson gives them order. Towns gives them offensive geometry. Bridges gives them two-way shot. Making Hart gives them chaos, rebounds, connective passing, and edge. McBride gives them point of attack pressure and enough shooting to punish help. Mitchell Robinson gives them possession warfare around the rim. Anunoby, when healthy, gives them another elite defensive body. That is not one superstar carrying a decent team. That is a playoff machine with multiple gears. And the truly frightening part is that the Knicks seem to be peaking at exactly the right time. Through their first 10 playoff games, they outscored opponents by 19.4 points per GAME, the best differential through 2 rounds in the 16-team playoff era. They also own the second best defense and third best defense of the postseason through May 10. Think about what that really means. This is not just a tough team. This is not just a team riding Madison Square Garden energy. This is a team combining elite scoring with elite resistance. That is the profile that usually survives deep into June. And now the context around the East makes it even more interesting. While New York is resting, Detroit and Cleveland are stuck in a series that has already become emotionally and physically costly. The Pistons had a chance to move within one win of the East Finals, but Donovan Mitchell erupted for 39 points in the second half of Game 4, powered Cleveland to a 112-103 win, and tied the series at 2-2. Game 5 now shifts back to Detroit. That matters for the Knicks, because no matter who survives that battle, the winner will not arrive fresh. If Detroit wins, New York gets a physical, confident, young team that already beat them 3-0 in the regular season. That is no small concern. If Cleveland wins, New York gets a veteran group with Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, and Evan Mobley, plus the momentum of surviving a heavyweight series. But here is the key. The Knicks do not look afraid of either possibility. Why? Because their style translates. Against Detroit, New York can match physicality, punish defensive lapses from outside, and force the Pistons to execute in the half court for long stretches. Against Cleveland, New York can attack the possession game, test the Cavs' perimeter containment, and make every Mitchell or Harden burst come with a rebounding price on the other end. This is why the Knicks feel different from many Eastern contenders. They do not need the matchup to be perfect. Their identity survives against different kinds of teams. That is rare, and it is why this sweep over Philadelphia should not be treated like a simple second round result. It may have been the moment when New York showed the entire East what it has become. Not a fun team. Not a gritty team. Not a team that is just happy to be here. A team that believes it can win the conference. A team that has already been through postseason battles. A team that knows how to play when every possession feels heavier. A team that can blow you out, grind you down, or break you in the middle of a game without changing who it is. That is the scary part. The Knicks are no longer trying to prove they belong. They are trying to prove that everyone else belongs on the same floor as them. And that is why the Eastern Conference has a new problem. Because while people keep talking about Detroit's rise, Cleveland's star power, and the uncertainty of the bracket, New York has already delivered the clearest statement of any team left in the East. We are ready now. Not later, not eventually. Now. The sweep said it, the 144 points screamed it, the rebounding confirmed it. The defense backed it up. The rest of the conference should hear it. Because, if the Knicks enter the Eastern Conference Finals with this level of confidence, this level of spacing, this level of physicality, and this level of defensive consistency, then the East may not be preparing for a normal series. It may be preparing for a collision with the team that currently looks most comfortable inside playoff violence. And that is the ultimate question after this 4-0 sweep. Are the Knicks simply hot? Or have they finally become exactly what every championship contender fears most? A team that does not just survive hard games, but actually gets stronger inside them. Because if that answer is yes, then the most dangerous team in the East may already be waiting, and it may be wearing orange and blue.